All right. Thank you, folks, for joining us for what is now our final honors program colloquium of the fall semester, sort of a bonus colloquium that we had the opportunity to put together. And that is thanks to our speaker today, which is Ms. Ariell Hopkins. Ariell is graduating Saturday, I suppose, with her bachelor's degree in science with a major in biology. She's planning on applying to graduate school next year. And I know we have a number of the biology faculty, as well as Dr. Kang, who was her mentor in this honors project. If any of them want to say anything before we get started, by all means, you're welcome to. Otherwise, I will turn it over to Ariell.
Well, when I had the Ariell, she took physics too. I was really impressed how well she understood. Normally, physics can be a very tough topic. Also, during this honors project, I gave her idea what kind of topics she could do some research, and most of the work has been done by her. She was a very independent researcher. I was very impressed. I am pretty sure she will do very well in the medical school.
Thank you.
And she's a top biology student, one of the best.
Thank you. All right, if y'all are ready, I can start.
Yeah, take it away.
Okay. Y'all see everything okay? All right, so if y'all don't know me, my name is Ariell Hopkins, and I'm gonna be presenting my research project that I did with Dr. Kang over ethics in science. And so I'm just going to give a little brief introduction about ethics in science. So believe it or not, we are faced with many ethical dilemmas within the field of science. Many times, people are put in situations where they must decide whether to speak the truth or help themselves. Sadly, there are many cases where scientists as well as medical professionals have abused their power for their own personal gains. And because of the vast number of ethical dilemma cases in the field of science, Dr. Kang and I took a deep dive into specific cases and how we can prevent them in the future. It's not letting me switch it. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to give a little overview of what I'm going to talk about today. So the first thing I'm going to touch on is specific case studies regarding ethics in science. And so the first one I'm going to touch on is the Charles Dawson and the Piltdown Man case, as well as Detroit Medical Center medical malpractice case. And then I'm going to touch on some broad statistics regarding ethics and medical malpractice. And then I'm going to attempt to answer the question, what is the cause of unethical behavior? And how can we fix the problem of ethics in science in the future? So the first case I'm going to talk about is Charles Dawson and the Piltdown Man. In 1912, Arthur Smith Wood and Charles Dawson said that they discovered a fossil that provided the link between apes and humans. They named this fossil the Piltdown Man due to its location near the village of Piltdown, Sussex in the United Kingdom. This fossil had an ape-like mandible and a human-like brain case. And there were also primitive stone tools and other mammalian fossils found at the site that were all stained a dark reddish-brown color, which we'll later find out that Dawson painted himself. And the Piltdown Man had a molar tooth that was between the size of an ape and a human. And Dawson claimed that there were two sites where he found evidence of fossils associated with the Piltdown Man, which were Piltdown 1 and Piltdown 2. And here's a brief timeline of when the fossils were discovered. And so in 1907, the first discovery was made, which was the discovery of the Heidelberg jaw. And then in 1908, Piltdown's first skull fragment was found by Charles Dawson. And then we see in 1911 and 1912, there were more fossils found or claimed to have been found, and they were all stained the same dark reddish brown color. And then in 1913, Dawson finally announces that he found this Piltdown Man to the Geological Society. And then unfortunately in 1916, Charles Dawson died just after he announced that Piltdown 2 was a specific site where he found more fossils. And so unfortunately, it was later found that Charles Dawson forged this discovery for his own fame. And so at the time, there was a huge race for scientists to find evidence that could prove evolution. But unfortunately, this hoax was not uncovered for 40 years. And since it took so long for it to be determined a hoax, this caused many false teachings about the discovery that had to be essentially untaught and taken out of classrooms. And what kind of started this was Kenneth Oakley, which was the head of anthropology at the British Museum of Natural History, along with Oxford scientists Joseph Wiener and Wilfred Legros Clark, all shared suspicions about the integrity of this finding and posted their studies of the material in 1953 and 1955, which then led to them finding out that it was a true hoax. So they found that the Piltdown Man consisted of an orangutan jaw with a human skull that Charles Dawson tried to fit together. And all the remains were stained to look the same color. And also, many of the fossils were from different locations planted in Piltdown 1 or 2 to make them look authentic. And so the next case that we're going to talk about is the Detroit Medical Center medical malpractice case. And so the Detroit Medical Center was charged for medical malpractice because they ignored that 10-year-old Faith DeGrand's spinal cord was being compressed in a routine scoliosis surgery. And so I'm not really sure if they just ignored that her spinal cord was being compressed, or they just didn't know that it was being compressed. But unfortunately, they ignored many signs that were very evident after she got out of surgery. And so unfortunately, because of this, she became permanently paralyzed, and the doctor actually went on vacation and completely ignored all of the warning signs. And so, of course, her family definitely took the doctor and the medical center to trial. And during trial, instead of confessing to their malpractice, the hospital claimed that a phantom blood clot unseen during the surgery caused her injuries. And then, of course, the jury saw past their fabrications and found them guilty in the end. But this just got me thinking, why do people choose or think it's okay to lie like this for their own good? I just don't understand it. And so then it kind of got me wondering, are there any similarities between the genetic makeup of people, such as Charles Dawson and physicians of the Detroit Medical Center, that cause them to be more prone to lying? And so I really wanted to kind of dive deeper into this topic. And so in order to do that, I had to start with broad statistics regarding ethics and medical malpractice. And so some of these statistics that I found, or facts that I found, are that the personal gain or incentives increases the risk for someone to engage in unethical behavior. And so if someone thinks that they're going to get something out of this, such as Charles Dawson could get fame, then that's what essentially causes them to do this immoral act. And also found that people lie or cheat more when they have the ability to gain social prestige, which is most likely why Dawson chose to create the hoax of the Piltdown Man, so that he could be first in the race to find more out about evolution. And then I also found that there are some discrepancies that make it hard to determine why people are unethical. On one hand, some say that incentives make people more inclined to unethical behavior. But then on the other hand, some people want to think of themselves as moral beings, which makes them do the right thing in the end. So this is kind of a confusing topic. And I also found that people must convince themselves that the dishonesty is morally acceptable. And so these doctors involved in this medical malpractice case, along with Charles Dawson, had to truly believe in their minds that what they were doing was acceptable by the public. And so I also found that increasing rules makes people less likely to lie. And so what rules could have been in place with Piltdown Man in order to prevent the hoax from happening? And so then I also looked into statistics regarding medical malpractice. So malpractices in medicine and scientific research can be done on purpose or by accident. And the Center for Scientific Integrity, or the CSI, helped to promote ethical scientific practices. So in 2008, a survey amongst researchers funded by the National Institutes of Health suggested there might be as many as 1,000 cases of potential scientific misconduct going unreported each year. So this just truly showed how much of a problem this ethical issue is right now. And so according to Fang et al., in a detailed study using 2,047 retracted articles within biomedical and life sciences, 67.4% of retractions were due to some form of misconduct, which could be fraud or suspected fraud, duplicate publication, and plagiarism. And only 21.3% of retractions were due to genuine error. So many doctors involved in these medical malpractice cases knew that what they were doing was wrong, but they still did it anyways. And so after I kind of found this information, I wanted to dig even deeper and ask, what is the cause of unethical behavior? Could it have anything to do with genetics? And so I actually found that there is a certain gene that can make people more prone to lying. And so this gene is tryptophan hydroxylase 2-SNP. And an SNP is a single nucleotide polymorphism, which is essentially just a difference by one nucleotide in a gene. So one person could have a gene with guanine as their base, and another person could have the same gene but with cytosine as the base, which could cause huge differences in behavior. And so I found in the article, To Cheat or Not to Cheat, tryptophan hydroxylase 2-SNP variants contribute to dishonest behavior. Shin et al. Found that some people can be more prone to lying if they possess certain genes. So in a sense, lying can be hereditary. And I also found that the results of this exploratory study provide provisional evidence that SNP variants across the tryptophan hydroxylase 2, or TPH2 gene that encodes the rate-limiting enzyme in the biosynthesis of brain serotonin contribute to individual differences in deceptive behavior. And specifically, results with this specific polymorphism on the TPH2 gene showed that people with the guanine allele were more prone to lying. And they also stated that the guanine allele is also related to having a higher chance of psychiatric disorders such as bipolar disorder, depression, or anxiety. And so after I found this out, I kind of started thinking, are the people involved in most unethical cases those that have this gene or genes that are similar? So this is definitely something that I'd like to look into more extensively in the future. And so now that I've kind of figured out reasoning for unethical behavior, I then wanted to try and explore how can we fix the problem of ethics in science in the future. And so I found that a lot of scientists are pushing for an open science movement, which is transparency in all scientific discoveries so that they can be fact-checked and reproduced. So right now there's kind of a big reproducibility crisis going on in science where experiments really don't have the tools to be reproduced very well. And so because of this, I think it would be great if we could increase the reproducibility of experiments so that they could be further fact-checked in the future. And another way where we could fix the problem of this ethical issue is to grant access to new discoveries to the public. So during the time of the Piltdown Man, largely influential scientists at this time stated that the Piltdown Man was authentic, which shows how people of power can distort scientific results. So unfortunately, this is just a huge issue going on right now. And so if we grant access of new discoveries to the public, then the public eye will be able to see and decide for themselves whether something is authentic or a hoax, instead of just relying on powerful people that could possibly manipulate us. And then also, I'd like to grant access to supporting evidence with all new discoveries at the time they are published. So if there's supporting evidence at the time a discovery is published, then scientists as well as the public will be able to decide for themselves whether to trust a certain discovery based on the evidence or to determine if it's a hoax or not. And so going forward, Dr. Kang and I plan on doing more research over this topic. And we'd like to kind of dig deeper and find more cases in the future that account for specific single nucleotide polymorphisms being involved in unethical decision-making. And then we'd also like to touch on the topic of ethics in COVID-19. Was it ethical to have global shutdowns where people didn't have regular access to doctor's appointments or the dentist? Was it ethical for families to not have access to their dying loved ones? And what are better approaches to pandemics in the future? And then these are all the references that I used. And now I guess I'd just like to open it up for any questions that y'all may have for me or Dr. Kang.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. I'll give you the Zoom sort of applause, as it were. Folks are welcome to applaud on their own if they wish. Very interesting. Okay. Yeah. If folks have questions, then feel free to raise your hand or raise your Zoom hand. Or okay. If you want to stop sharing, then we can. Okay. We'll see everybody as well. And I'll give folks just a little bit of time to think about questions.
How many studies did you find on this tryptophan thing? Sounds a little hazy to me.
Yes. So there was actually 3 separate studies that talked about this certain gene. But then I'm also doing research with Dr. Quaid as well that's talking about genomics and personalized medicine. And so basically there's just a lot of genes and specifically SNPs that can either make someone more prone to a certain behavior or even, so what I'm doing with Dr. Quaid is I'm talking about more from the medical point of view, so how people could respond to different medications. But it's fairly new in the scientific and medical world, I guess, but it's mostly, I guess, these polymorphisms that show up where there's lots of different reactions to behavior and stuff like that. It was very interesting.
Dr. Layton.
Thank you. Yeah, so, you mentioned the reproducibility crisis, and have any of those SNP studies been reproduced, or are they all sort of one-off studies on the phenomenon?
Yeah, so unfortunately, they're all kind of like new studies. And so I didn't find any that could specifically be reproduced, but I'd honestly like to try and see if there's some kind of study that I could do working with genomics. It'd be kind of a long shot, but basically you just have to get someone's specific genome, and it'd be kind of more from the psychology perspective, but you'd have to take someone's genome and see if they have these specific genes and what behaviors they possess and see if there's any similarities. But no, I couldn't find specifically any cases like that, but I wish I could do something like that on my own, I guess.
Interesting study, Ariel, and
Thank you.
great presentation. What was the sample size of the experiment they did on SNP for people becoming more prone to doing unethical things? How many do you have?
I'll have to go in and check.
data?
Let me pull up the article really quick because I don't remember off the top of my head.
Or just approximately how many?
I'm pretty sure what I remember reading was I want to say like 300 different case studies of individuals with this certain gene because it was in psychology. So there was a lot of individuals possessing these certain anxiety behaviors that then would make them where they would be more prone to lying due to anxiety or depression.
Were they volunteers or how did they pick those people?
I think they were just people that were at a specific psychiatric facility. So I'm not necessarily sure if they volunteered or if they were just, I assume they had to be told about the study.
Okay. And you know about the DNA structure discovery unethical thing that was done by James Watson and Francis Crick and Rosalind Franklin, who did all these crystallography work.
Mm-hmm.
And they used her data in the middle of the night without her knowledge. And they were awarded the Nobel Prize a few years later. But unfortunately, a Nobel Prize is not awarded to the deceased individual. So her name is totally forgotten, just like the middle name in the Western world. So it's actually Watson, Franklin, and Crick, but everybody knows, or most of us know, is Watson and Crick. So, and if it was today, then I think they'll be in big trouble. But at that time, it was not like a set rules that you cannot do this or that. So yeah, that'll be
that's really interesting.
Dr. Perry, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm a little out of my element here because in history, I think scholars just want to see the documents that are examined and cited in many ways. But my question is on the reproducibility. Do you have some scholars in the science field who kind of also just spell out even more. Well, they all spell it out, but even try to help others get the same experiment or do the same experiment, see if they get the same results. And I wonder if some of the problem with the reproducibility is because of some kind of specialized equipment. So if you have really specialized equipment, then somebody else has to get similar specialized equipment before they can reproduce it.
Yeah, that's really interesting because this is just a very complex topic because, you have to ask the question, is it ethical or is it not? Or is it just some people have more privileges than others or more power than others that cause discrepancies? There's lots of many different directions you could go for this. So that's why I'm very interested in this topic.
Yeah. Dr. Allard.
Ariel, did you happen to look at the Tuskegee syphilis study?
No, I did not.
That's a classic unethical study and kind of racist thing. So you might want to take a look at it. They knew these Black folks had syphilis and they didn't treat them. They just watched them deteriorate as a result of the having the syphilis bug.
Wow. Yeah, I'll definitely look into that one for sure.
Sadly, probably no shortage of cases of unethical experiments and such. Dr. Layton.
Okay. Hello. Now I'm on video. So yeah, I was going to follow up with Dr. Perry's question about specialized equipment. One of the advantages of the open science movement, if you want to call it that, or we'll just simply call it open science practices, is taking advantage of large-scale replication efforts. So, we're not, it's fine if sort of one lab wants to replicate a study, but when we can get a bunch of labs together and use the resources of all of those labs collectively, we can collect large samples from a lot of different institutions and a lot of different geographic locations from a lot of different populations, and have multiple labs in a coordinated, very carefully controlled way, try to replicate that effect. And so if for example, I were to collect genetic material here, I could send it off to one of the labs that has the equipment to do the analysis and so on. So that's kind of, the open science movement has sort of gone along with, the ability to communicate globally with lots of different laboratories, largely because of the internet and the ease of communication, the ease of creating repositories where we can store open data, open materials, and open publications. So I think it it has the promise to be able to really alleviate some of the problems of institutions not having that specialized equipment. It's also one of the benefits of it is institutions like ours that are small can collect data and contribute to large-scale replications so that we can be part of the discovery. We can be part of solving the problem of the reproducibility crisis, even though we don't have a lot of participants and don't have a lot of resources.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Cool. Any other questions or anything for Ariell? All right. I just blame the entire structure of grant funding personally for destroying ethicality in science, but it's a topic for a different issue.
Well, no, you're right. You're right. I think, and one of the Ariel, you might look up the name Diederik Stapel, Stapel, was a social psychologist in the Netherlands. He falsified or misrepresented data and had 55 publications retracted.
Wow.
He was fired from his job as the dean and professor. He voluntarily surrendered his PhD, so he no longer has a PhD. And he actually wrote a memoir about his experiences. And you might make the argument that he's blaming it on the structures, but one of the things that we know as social psychologists is that the environment and the sort of the reinforcement structures, the ways that, for example, professors are rewarded is by publications. We get tenure because we publish a lot. If you're a graduate student in psychology, you had better have at least 1 or 2 publications to get into the best graduate schools. And those publications have to be in top tier journals. And so the incentive systems are set up in the tenure and promotion systems at universities, in how we get grants, in how we get into grad school and so on. The incentive systems are set up in such a way to really encourage this kind of behavior, assuming you don't get caught.
Right.
It's also hard to get replication studies published because the journals want new stuff they don't want to publish. So that's another problem.
That was true up until about 5 years ago. And we're starting to see a lot more journals which will accept something called registered reports. And basically with a registered report, you send the journal your basically your introduction section, your methods section, your data analysis plan, all of your statistical analysis assumptions and exclusions and so on. And basically what they do is they evaluate your methods and your background for the research and say, yes, this looks good, and assuming that you follow this pre-registered protocol, then we will publish whether it's a null result or whether it's not a null result. And so the use of registered reports is starting to solve the problem as well.
That may be true in psychology, but no.
Not so much in biology, I guess.
No.
Interesting. I suppose in history, it all has to be new somehow, paradoxically. But anyway, this is the thing. A bunch of academics, I'm sure we would more than happily sit forever talking about unlocking the nature of human behavior. That is a question that has puzzled folk for thousands and thousands of years. I think it's really cool, how you're kind of approaching it, Ariell. And who knows, maybe there is some sort of genetic predisposition to cutting a few corners. Do we have any last questions or anything? There we go. All right. The applause tells me no, that we are done. So yes, thank you, Ariell. It was really, really cool. And thank you for agreeing to present here just a couple of days before you are heading off.
Get it last minute.
No, I love it. It's a nice sort of capstone thing for your time here at A&M. And I look forward to seeing you on Saturday at graduation and applauding your achievements then. Otherwise, thank you everybody for joining us. I'll get this posted on YouTube, and I will send something out in January with our spring colloquium lineup. So have a good rest of the semester.